Oh, all right. This mic is working. I think we should get started, guys. I know it's been a long time. December SAT, what can you say? One of those things that you don't want to do, but you can't really avoid. But anyway, I'm so excited to be back. So today is our agenda here. I'm going to first talk about where have we been. Hi, do you want to come in? All good, all good. So because it's been a while and there's plenty of new members here, I'm going to talk about where have we been. So don't worry if you missed the previous sessions. Secondly, I'm going to introduce this thought experiment. It's called a philosophical zombie. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about how is it an attack on physicalism. I'm going to explain it. And lastly, we're going to talk about how good of an attack is it. So in this last section, you guys are going to have a lot of opportunity to talk and discuss, which is why I made the desk into that shape, right? So section 1, where have we been? Well, we started off by saying all of us are conscious, right? It feels like something to be me. Whether I am windsurfing in Berkeley Marina, windsurfing is just basically surfing, but you have a sail so you can surf faster. Yes, I do windsurf. I know it's awesome. You just try it out. Yeah, Berkeley used to offer these windsurfing lessons in the summer sessions. It was great. But anyway, when I was surfing on the ocean, right, it feels like something. The breeze of the wind, when I accidentally drop down into the water, the saltiness of the Pacific, which, I managed to get plenty of taste of, all of them feels like something. Or when I'm in semi-formal, I'm partying with Aiden, right, the joy, the thrill, also, it feels like something. Or the taste of pizza. There is this subjective feeling. And we call all of these subjective feelings qualia, the conscious experience. But there comes the question, why are we conscious, right? For example, if we ingest this pizza into my mouth, I'm probably going to be, no worries. It's all good, I'm gonna edit it out. But if I put this pizza into my mouth, I'm gonna feel the taste of the marinara or the saltiness of pepperoni. But imagine if you just accidentally drop down a piece of pizza on the floor, kind of like Luke did. Would the floor be conscious of the tomato sauce? Probably not. It's just on there, right? It's just on there. The floor is not feeling anything. So here comes the question, right? What is so special about us that makes us conscious? There is this view called physicalism. It says science can explain why are we conscious through studying the brain, through studying the human body, physics, biology, whatever. Consciousness comes from these physical things, and it kind of emerges from the physical things. If we study it, we can explain consciousness. But there is a problem with this view. It's called the hard problem of consciousness. And that's because this physical body, this neurons, whatever, it feels to be quite different than conscious feelings, than tomato sauce, than windsurfing, right? They seem to be two categories of stuff. It doesn't seem like if I dig deep enough into the brain, I can find feelings, love, hatred, or whatever. So this arrow in the middle here, from brain to qualia, is really hard. Then might you say, why don't we just call consciousness and physical body two different stuff? This is a view called dualism. They think mind and body are different substances, and one does not explain another. This might be pretty intuitive, right? Perhaps this is pretty coherent with the Christianity school of thought, that we have this immortal soul inside our physical body. However, this view also has its problems. It's called the interaction problem. And that is basically the brain and the mind, they interact with each other. If you postulate, this mind is non-physical, how is it meant to interact with the physical body then? Maybe that sounds a bit abstract. Here's an example. Say Luke just spilled his tomato ketchup on the floor. He has a thought that goes, right, not much space to write here. He has a thought that goes, I need to clean up these messy bunch of ketchup, right? And this thought then directs his limbs to grab a tissue paper, kneel down on the floor and wipe the ketchup out. So there's movement. The thing is, this thought by dualism is meant to be non-physical. So how is it meant to cause a physical thing such as movement? It is a significant problem of dualism. And the philosopher Gilbert Ryle has summarized it pretty concisely, saying, by believing dualism, you're kind of believing in a ghost in a physical machine, right? So that's to put all of these stuff into a mind map to organize them. I first of all started with this problem, right? What is the relationship between consciousness and brain? One view called dualism, they have this problem called interaction. The other view called physicalism, they have this problem called the hard problem of consciousness. Today, what we're gonna do is we're gonna think about this thought experiment, which is meant to be an attack on physicalism. So that's section 1 recap. And now on to section 2. What is a zombie? What is a zombie, guys? Is it something like this? It's pretty scary, right? In our typical impression, a zombie is meant to be, moving in a clunky form. Maybe I'm gonna sprint up and eat your brain out, That'll be a good dinner for a typical zombie. But is that what we're talking about here? Well, it turns out the concept is quite different. Compared to this, the zombie is actually more like this. What do I mean by that? Well, the zombie actually has the same physical structure as a normal human, down to the last molecule. And it also behaves the same way. But the only difference is it is unconscious. So say if I had this zombie Jeremy here, right? The zombie Jeremy is not going to look like this. It's just going to look all the same like this. He's going to lecture you guys philosophy of mind. He's going to do everything that I do. With the only difference being... What did I do? I am the Jeremy. I am the original Jeremy, right? That's actually one of the problems of philosophical zombie. You never know if somebody is a zombie or an actual human, but we're going to cover it later. Anyway, sum it up. It's the same as humans, but no qualia. It's dark inside. It cannot feel anything. So that's the philosophical zombie for you. Now, why is it an attack on physicalism? Remember, physicalism is the view that studying the brain can explain consciousness. Consciousness is based on something physical. Sure.
I was going to answer the question. How is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's no, if you're just studying consciousness through the brain, the only really, you only can see the neurons firing when you react to something. With the zombie, it still has neurons firing. You can't tell if it's you can't say if it's feeling. You can just a neuron.
Yeah, that's it, right? So to put it more formally, here's how the attack goes. If we can conceive zombie to exist, this means they are possible to exist. Notice how I bolted this conceive here. This is a bit of a vague term. We're going to discuss it later, but for now, just imagine this conceived as being imagined. So, if zombies are possible to exist, this means we have the stuff that has the same physical structure as us, but unconscious. And this must mean physical structure is not sufficient for consciousness. Therefore, physicalism is false. If that still sounds quite abstract to you, here's another example. So, Jeremy, the goalkeeper, is smart. As all of you guys know, I am a great goalkeeper. And as some of you guys may know, I am smart. Well, if you don't know I'm smart, just, trust I'm smart, right? Anyway, enough bragging. Jeremy is smart, and he's a good goalkeeper. Let's imagine I have this guy called John. He is also smart. Not to imply anybody. I actually just thought of it as a random name, actually. But John is smart, but he is not a good goalkeeper. So what does this mean? This means that being smart is not sufficient for anyone being a good goalkeeper, right? John is smart, but he's not a good goalkeeper. So there must be something else other than smart that's making Jeremy a good goalkeeper. And it's the same deal in the philosophical zombie here, right? Jeremy has the same physical structure, let's call it X, and he is conscious. The zombie has also the same physical structure, X, but the zombie is not conscious. So, going with this logic, consciousness must be something else than the physical structure. There must be something else that is making Jeremy conscious, other than the physical structure. So physicalism is false. So that's the attack for you. That's the argument for you. Now, how good of an argument it is? I want you guys to form group of 3 and 4 and just sort of talk it out.
Well, I feel like it's a good argument, and it is a good argument against it, but it's not a good argument.
It hasn't proven like basis. Like I see where it's coming from.
The example of the word.
Yeah. I don't know.
It is a good argument against it.
I think it's a good argument in my opinion. It's structure to it.
There's no really way to distinguish between.
But
Can you like go back a few?
sure.
I'll just tell you.
Sort of the reason I don't think is
Yeah.
because
You mean this one?
word
This one?
is very vague.
No worries.
For example, say,
There was the one where it had the dualism.
can I
on top
conceive
and
of something that is heavier than
Oh, that was the
I
other one.
didn't explain
Like,
Yeah,
This
that's
one.
Yeah.
Hey, can I think of something that's heavier than everything else that exists? But what is that? Does that give it any reality whatsoever? That can conceivably unicorn. Does that give it any reality whatsoever? So the fact that I can conceivably give it unicorn, like not give it
Luke's building that up.
my conception, which is arguing.
So, what do you think?
Okay, you conceive of it, therefore.
You guys agree with the argument?
I don't know.
No. But you do think it's valid, right? Like the logic.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'd have to see like other arguments to see which one
Like,
I kind of
that's
believe
why I want to go
more.
back on dualism.
So, in this case, the zombie argument is meant to support dualism, right?
Yeah.
So it's saying consciousness is something else. But actually, later, I'm gonna present a few good counter arguments to the zombie argument. So, just remember how decisive are you on this zombie argument now?
Yeah.
Maybe your mind is to be changed after a few minutes.
So,
Yes.
There will be counter arguments. Quite a lot, actually.
Do you believe in the multiverse?
Ooh. No, I don't. I think whatever happens, I don't think there's like are you saying every time a decision made it splits in two?
No. That's it. There's an infinite amount of
But-
universe.
Luke, I think now we should make the two multiverses, merge. We're about to share your opinions here. So what I want to do here is I want each group to select a representative and talk about their consensus. Yeah. And just remember, I'm gonna give this microphone to whoever that's gonna talk. So if you don't have the microphone, just remember one person at a time, right? So who wants to talk in the group?
I think that what we were discussing at the table was that it's hard to find a correlation between what you can conceive, if I might use that term, and the reality. So you can conceive the idea of a unicorn, but that doesn't make it any real. And also thinking about the counter argument, like I'm sure that at least physicalism aspires to translate everything into physical terms. So I'm sure they have a way to differentiate a zombie from a person in terms of like physical language of physics. But yeah.
Yes. So you made a good point there, right? You said just because we can conceive zombies being existing, it might not be possible for them to exist. They might violate certain physical or biological laws. I'm gonna elaborate on this point further.
Is the definition of conceive just thinking, just being able to think about it, or is it like
I'm gonna
more-
explain it in detail later. So, your group? Okay.
I mean, I think it's a fair argument, but I once again think like I don't think the zombies are possible. Like you can come up with the idea of one, but I just don't think they actually exist. I think everyone like has consciousness. I don't think there's living things without consciousness, because in order to like survive and go about, you have to make decisions. And so I don't think they can kind of just luck into that and surviving. I don't know.
So I read
I
a,
use it for the good brain.
I read
So
a,
good-
a short science fiction book, story.
Wait, Dr. Gassi.
Yeah, okay. So I read a short science fiction story that tried to give it some flesh to the idea of, I guess no pun intended, to the idea of a zombie, of a philosophical zombie. So it might work like this, is what they said. Someone might come up with a drug that you take, and nobody knows any difference in you. Nobody can see any difference in you. But after the drug effects wear out, you wake up and you remember what you did. You remember this happened, but I wasn't there while it happened. It's kind of weird. I mean, but this is kind of like what it would be like for you to temporarily turn into a zombie. And then you wake up and you're like, well, I remember that happened to this body, but I wasn't the one making those decisions. They were kind of like on autopilot, which is pretty interesting idea.
Your point, like, is I think accepting the idea of a zombie is not kind of accepting dualism, which is because a zombie is like, it looks like we think that a zombie is a guy which just like a body that walks but it's not really conscious. So it's like kind of accepting that you can take the mind out of the equation. So it's like accepting dualism at some point or not.
So you did make a good point there. So how does the zombie relate to dualism? Me personally, I think it's quite a strong support for dualism if this argument works. Because what this argument says is physical body is not sufficient for consciousness, right? There's this other physical being, zombie, same physical structure, but unconscious. So it is suggesting that consciousness is coming from something else than physical manifestation. But anyway, guys, you are actually as good as some philosophers now. Conceivability, is that necessarily probability? That's actually a very good counter-argument that I'm gonna talk about. And now, what is conceivability? That just means something is possible to exist without logical contradiction. Well, what is something that is inconceivable? Well, here are a few examples, right? For example, a square triangle. I told ChatGPT to generate this picture, didn't working anyway. It's not because of ChatGPT is not good enough. It's just that the definition is contradictory, right? If you are a square, you can't be a triangle. And if you are a triangle, you can't be a square. Therefore, it is inconceivable. Another example, I told it to generate a colorful black, right? Now, it didn't give me what it wants because, again, if you are colorful, you can't be black. And if you are black, you can't be colorful. How does that relate to the argument? Remember how it started out with, if zombies are conceivable, it is possible for them to exist. And then it goes, if it is possible to exist, physicalism is false, blah, blah, blah. Now let's focus on the conceivability a little bit. Think about it. Are zombies actually conceivable? To put it in other words, can these two properties exist without logical contradiction? Physically the same as a conscious being and unconscious. Can you talk about it within your group first?
Oh, so are you guys familiar with horrible I see like physical kind of a vision.
Dr. Garcia brought up a good point. It's like when you're under like surgery, like you know it happened, but you weren't there.
I mean, without
So, like,
hours.
Like I know, for example, like
Without
sleepwalking,
I
like
say.
it happened, and I actually like changed my mind on this. Like if I sleepwalk, it happened, and I moved around, and like I used to do it all the time when I was younger, but I wasn't like I didn't think to myself, let me get out of bed, let me walk around. It just happened.
Happens.
Right. So I think it's definitely, it could be possible for them to exist because at one point, I mean, by definition, I was a zombie because I was physically the same as a conscious being walking around, but I wasn't conscious.
Perhaps not, because when you are sleeping, your brain actually moves around in a different way. Neurons are creating different activities. And also, you are right in the way that you are behaving as quite similar as a normal conscious being, right? But I would doubt whether you are physically the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So maybe, I guess it's not conceivable.
It might not be.
Yeah, it's a difficult topic.
Yeah.
I don't care if you tell me it is. I should treat it like it's conscious.
Oh, cool. Same deal. Discuss it. So, you're good?
No, but I already went, so I think you're up now.
What particular point are we discussing?
Are zombies conceivable? So,
Yeah.
can these two traits? Sure.
Oh no, that clicking sound was indicative of I touched something I shouldn't on the microphone, and the thing just stopped recording for the rest of the session. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna cut out the rest of this original video, and I'm gonna go through the rest of the content on a computer screen recording, just like how I done in the first video. So guys, I'm back. Happy New Year. The time of me recording this latter part of the lecture is actually 8:34 p.m. Wednesday, January the 1st, 2025, which is much later than when the previous part of the lecture has been recorded. I believe it was like mid-November of 2024. Oh gosh, it's weird to perceive 2024 as last year, but hey, we're here. Anyway, that's some late-stage procrastination of me. I probably should have made this part of the lecture much earlier, but guess what? I'm a teenager. I'm entitled to be procrastinatory, if that's a word at all. Anyway, back to the topic. The general consensus of this group discussion is that most of our participants think this philosophical zombie is conceivable. So let's just go with the flow now. Let's not debate about whether it is conceivable. Let's just, kind of hypothesize that they are conceivable. But this argument might even still have weaknesses, even if we admit for the moment that they are conceivable. Now let's see what are the weaknesses. So problem number one for this argument is that just because you can conceive something to exist doesn't actually mean they are possible to exist. To clarify the distinction, here's an example. So 200 years ago, there's a bad chemist, his name is Jeremy. He said, I can conceive the water is not made of H2O. Now, from a current standpoint, we can clearly see that this statement is impossible. From laws of physics, laws of chemistry, we can derive that it is simply impossible for water to not be made of H2O. But at the time, because bad chemist Jeremy does not know all of these laws, God, it's 200 years ago, he does not have this much knowledge. So logically, he can conceive the water is made of something like perhaps JEREMY or something that's clearly not H2O, just due to his lack of physical knowledge, right? So the same logic may apply to the philosophical zombie. Now a bad neuroscientist may claim that, I can conceive the philosophical zombie to exist. Whereas perhaps some point in the future, we will discover that it is impossible for something to be made neurologically same as us, but absent of consciousness. We might discover new neuroscientific knowledge that says, if you have the human brain, you must also have the human consciousness, because that's just what the human brain do, right? That is completely possible. That is a plausible thing to discover. So the point is, we can conceive things that are impossible to exist due to the lack of knowledge, right? Just because we can think philosophical zombies can exist doesn't mean they are possible. In the future, we might discover that they are impossible through studying neuroscience. So that was problem number 1 for you. Even if you can conceive philosophical zombies, doesn't mean they can exist. And here's problem number 2. In this problem, I'm gonna attack its conceivability. So let's think about it. What are we presupposing to conceive the existence of zombies? And what is the conclusion of the whole zombie argument? Alright, take a pause. I'm gonna reveal the answer. So here are my ideas. If you have different ideas, feel free to express them in the comment section. So what we are presupposing is that physical composition is not sufficient for consciousness. Because when you are saying, hey, I can conceive this zombie having the same body, the same physical composition as me, but unconscious, you are saying that implicitly physical composition is not sufficient for consciousness. Because if it is sufficient, the zombie will be conscious since it has the same physical composition as normal human beings. By saying that it is not conscious, you're saying physical composition is not sufficient. So that is the premise. But what is also the conclusion of the whole philosophical zombie argument? Well, the conclusion of this whole argument is also that physical composition is not sufficient for consciousness. So don't you see? What we are presupposing is the conclusion of the argument. Doesn't this sound like a circular argument? To me it does, right? What we are presupposing, our premise, zombie can possibly exist, need to be supported by this conclusion of having the same body is insufficient for consciousness. Not necessarily saying that the whole logic of this argument is false. Right? The logic might not be false because it is always true since it goes in a circle. But what I'm saying is just that this argument is not really providing any plausible support. So what do I mean by concrete support? Well, let's consider an example of a mom forcing her child to study. Let's victimize Jeremy again because why not? Poor guy Jeremy. Anyway, so one day Jeremy came back to his house. His mom said to him, "Jeremy, you should study." Jeremy asked, "Why should I study?" Jeremy's mom said, "Because studying is important." Why is studying important? Because studying is something you should do. Therefore, you should study. Why should I study? Because studying is important. Why is it important? Because it is something you should do. You should study. Why should I study? Studying is important. Well, you get the point, right? This argument goes infinitely in circles, with this claim supporting this claim. But this claim also needs to be supported by this claim, right? So, I'm not really saying Jeremy's mom's logic is false per se, because every part follows naturally on the other. However, this argument is hollow, because when you are presenting an argument, you should really provide a claim and an evidence, not two claims that support each other. Because a claim can't really be a support, because that's something you are meant to be supporting in the first place, if that makes sense. So putting it back to here, right? You should study. Let it be the claim. And studying is important, right? Let this be the evidence for the claim. Now, if Jeremy asks, why is studying important? A better explanation would be studying is important because you want to get into a good university, and studying is what it takes. Right now, studying is important has a real substance, and now we can use that to support why you should study. But if we just say studying is important because it is something you should do, we're not really providing any real substance to it, right? It just goes in this circle. So, although personally I don't really think the philosophical zombie is a successful attack on physicalism, I think it still has its value and virtues. It clarifies our view, right? Think about it. If you believe zombies can exist, what will be the implications? What are the things that you are implicitly taking for granted? What are those implications if you don't think zombies can exist? Alright, here are two examples. If you believe zombie can exist, you will think that consciousness is an epiphenomenon. Epiphenomenon just means something that is not really making an impact. Because if you think zombies can exist, you're believing there's something that functions and behaves the same as us without consciousness, right? That means consciousness is not really making an impact on our functions, on our decisions in our daily life, because you believe that another thing without consciousness can make all the same decisions, can do all the same stuff. A second implication might be you think consciousness does not depend upon the physical world if you think zombies can exist. This point we have discussed pretty extensively in the previous slides, so I'm not going to explain this in detail. Well, on the contrary, if you don't believe zombie can exist, in your mind, it is possible for you to think that zombie is causal, meaning it makes a difference on our decisions. Therefore, something without consciousness might not behave the same as us, may not function the same as us. Therefore, philosophical zombie can't exist. Or you might think consciousness must be inseparable from the physical world. If you have the same neural systems, you must have consciousness. Right? That might be what you're thinking implicitly. So this just digs out what is being covered beneath your mind. Interesting thought experiment. And also, this provokes some interesting questions, like evolution, right? If zombies can exist, if something without consciousness can behave the same, function the same, why didn't evolution produce zombies? Why did evolution produce conscious human beings like Jeremy? Or are you a zombie? Right? I can't get into your head. For all I know, you just behave and function like a human, but I don't know whether you're conscious. To me, you may well be a zombie. So that's a bit of a support for solipsism, I guess. Solipsism just means the belief that I am the only one in this whole world that's conscious. Nobody else is. Anyway, that's probably it for this session. Here's the summary. The philosophical zombie is something that is physically the same as human beings, but they have no qualia, they are not conscious. And David Chalmers think if the zombie is conceivable, physicalism is false. And personally, I think this argument is flawed because firstly, conceivability does not entail possibility, and secondly, this is a bit of a circular argument, so this is quite hollow. And here are the contributions of the content of this session. Anyway, hopefully in this new year, I procrastinate a little less. My new year vision is that I put 20 videos on this channel. If I don't procrastinate, I'll surely achieve that. Let's make it together. All right, happy new year, guys. I'll see you soon.